Okay, I believe we are live.
Yes,
It shows we are live.
yeah, we are live. Okay, guys,
Okay.
how are you today? This is Ali, and today in this session, we will discuss the listening score. I'm not saying the listening section, the listening score. A bit confusing, yeah. So when I talk about listening, I should bring in our most senior listening instructor, Atik, with us. Atik, how are you today?
I'm good, Ali. How are you? Greetings, everyone.
I'm good, thank you. Atik, what's that on the screen? Too many tasks. What's going
So,
on?
Ali, we've got the entire scoring wave for listening module for all the scores that's going towards the listening section. So as you can see from the scoring web that the highest contributors towards the listening section are repeat sentence and write from dictation.
Mm-hmm.
But what a lot of the students don't realize is that retail lecture has, a lot of say towards your listening scores.
But retail
Now,
lecture is not a listening task.
indeed, it is not, but because it is contributing towards listening section, but it is part of the speaking section, students tend to neglect that element. So our objective today, me and you, we gathered together to make all the students aware of its importance and what are the things that the students should do, rather not do as well in retail lecture. That's what our
Okay.
purpose is today.
Okay. What about the task format? What is retail lecture? How many items? What should I do? If we can shed some light on that, please.
Yes, yep. So Ali, retail lecture, you will be solving 3 to 4 questions in your speaking section.
Okay.
Each question will be around, well, the prompt length would be anywhere between 60 to 120 seconds long. Whilst the prompt is on, you must take notes. Unfortunately, this is the only task where you cannot take any notes by typing. So you'd have to physically write down notes.
Okay.
And so when the prompt is over, you will be left with the notes and you'll have to retell those notes back. Now, the idea is to retell the lecture. So ideally, you want to tell a story, a short story. The system will give you 40 seconds to share your story, but I want to make this very loud and clear for the students today. So I'm going to highlight 3 important points. That first important point is be sure to speak for 35 to 36 seconds. Make that
Okay.
note, guys.
All
You
right.
should be speaking for 35 to 36 seconds. Now, there are plenty of reasons to why that is the case, but no, we're not going to go into details today. But for now, just keep in mind, your objective is to speak to 35 to 36 seconds. How to get there and how to avoid getting to, beyond 35, 36 seconds, that much I will make sure that I will cover today. Yes, so that's what the idea is.
All right.
Yeah.
What about the scoring? How are you guys scored in this task? What is the marking criteria?
Okay, yep. So retail lecture has a raw score of 15 marks,
Okay.
and these 15 marks are divided into 3 subcategories. So
Mm-hmm.
you have 5 marks for content, you've got 5 marks for oral fluency, and you've got 5 marks for pronunciation.
Mm-hmm.
So just like all the other speaking tasks as well, even though there are 3 marking guidelines, the system is going to check your work into 2 different arrays. So the way you speak and what are you actually saying. So the correctness of content as well as the mode of your speech, so as to say. The first and foremost thing I want to cover is what are you actually saying? Because today we started off with the listening module, right, Ali?
Yes.
And content is what generates the listening section's scores. All
This
right,
is the
so
reason why it has high contribution to the listening section because content
exactly.
is showing over here.
Exactly. So what is content is the notes that you're taking from the recording, right? So you are trying to retell that story. How much of it are you telling and how understandable is it will generate your listening scores. So guys, again, if we go into details, you'll find out a lot of things you would have to do. For example, you have to catch all the aspects and the implications and the conclusions. But today, if I were to give you the best tips, please do not try to take notes of everything or from everywhere. And what you'll end up with is that something a lot of the students think is content is taking keywords. What they misunderstand keywords for is just words themselves. So a lot of the times the student end up with lots of words, but on their own it doesn't make any sense, or they're just disjointed. So if you look right at the bottom of the screen, Ali, it says mentions disjointed elements of the presentation. So when that happens, even though you might have lots of notes, it doesn't necessarily
Okay.
generate your any scores. Now, the implications are towards your listening section, remember. So this is one of those reasons why the students may or may not get their listening scores.
Okay.
So that covers our content, which covers the listening aspects. I also want to touch base, Ali, on this on the speaking elements as
Just
well.
got some questions before.
Sure.
So for the content, quantity or quality?
It is always about quality. It's never about quantity, because we have to, the time frame where we are meant to speak for 35 seconds, and it is not possible for us to write everything down.
Okay.
So when you focus on quantity, you will end up with a bunch of words which would be dispersed and disjointed, may not make any sense.
Because what you mentioned here, you get 0 and you mentioned some disjointed elements, and this is something I really need to ask you about. In retail lecture, I think students, I may find it difficult to take notes. So I'm just working like a machine gun. Whatever I hear, I write down. Okay. So one day I was listening to a lecture about coffee. So I was taking coffee, milk, barista, roastery, beans, cups. And when I started speaking, I said the lecture talked about coffee, beans, the lecture talked about cups, milk, the lecture talked about roastery. Can I get a good score from this?
So as going back to my point, it's not about a bunch of words that you give back or shoot back to the system, but rather a very informative story, or be it a small story. Okay. So you've just heard a news report. You've heard, let's say, a report about coronavirus. So you cannot simply say the lecture talks about coronavirus, the lecture talks about 15 people, the lecture talks about 10. You see, those ideas doesn't make any sense. Okay. Probably if you write down the lecture talks about the effects of coronavirus in that way or form, it would make some form of sense.
That's it. Way better. Way better. Yeah.
You don't need, you wouldn't understand if you simply give those. That's exactly what Pearson's means by disjointed elements from the presentation.
It's now way clearer now. I got good content. The content is done. I need to speak it out. Any marks for the speaking?
Of course. Now, this, as after you've taken your notes, you've done your bit for documenting and note taking. The next element comes the speaking elements. Okay, so you have oral fluency and you have pronunciation. Again, there are lots of areas to how you can get better with your oral fluency and pronunciation. Keep in mind that the entire speaking section, the criteria for oral fluency and pronunciation are the same. So the way you did your read aloud, which was you were focusing on clarity and you're making sure that the syllable sounds were appropriate and clear, you are stressing and you are using the correct tone to express those words, you'd have to still do the same thing in written lecture as well. Okay. Because yeah, sure, you have good content, but what if you're not communicating it back properly? So, if you're not speaking properly, so you'll not only miss out on your speaking score, you will still not get the listening section score. So as soon as you start to speak, you have to make yourself aware of what are the things that's, covering the speaking area. So be sure not to hesitate, be sure not to mumble, and speak clearly. Today's message number 2 is speak with clarity. Okay, whatever the form and shape of your notes are, as soon as you start to speak, make sure that you are speaking with clarity without any hesitation and just go in a smooth rhythm.
And have you got a proper template for that?
Yes, that I would definitely help out with the template. But before that, Ali, I actually want to demonstrate a note-taking strategy that I use and I advise my students to do. And I've also chosen a tricky recording. It's not so smooth. It's not that clear enough, and the speaker is rushing through to complete the recording, and it's quite short. But at the same, we can still manage to get some content and quality content. I will give you an example. So Ali, buckle up, and I will play the recording, and I will just quickly move on to the next slide here. So it would be an empty slide, and I will type up. And ladies and gentlemen, just pay attention. I will just maybe, do I need to switch off my video? No, I think we're good. So I'll be typing, Ali.
All right. And I will be watching.
And here we go. Give me 2 seconds. I will play the recording now. Okay, where were we? Let me try it again.
I suppose it's the truism to point out that citizens need to be well informed. Maybe it's something we take for granted in our liberal Western democracies, but there will be plenty of societies, well, that is run counter to explicit government policy. Many areas of the world still suffer from the reverie of the deliberate missing information. Governments, especially the unelected ones, but also some elected ones, have denied the events that have ever taken place. They pretend that other events did take place. They would help spin what they cannot deny. And sure, they've used every trick of the book to pull the eyes of the world, and in an attempt to cover up their mistakes.
To cover up their mistakes. Okay, right. Ali, I apologize for the clarity of my notes, but you know,
at least you can read it.
Yes, that's the idea, dear students. As long as you can read your notes without any hesitation, you would be fine. So the next demonstration that I want to give is the speaking elements. So as when the prompt is over, you only get 10 seconds of preparation time, and after that you would have to start speaking. So here we go. Let's try and do. I have the alarm clock here, so we'll start off again. So pay attention in 3, 2, 1. According to the specific oration provided by the speaker, citizens need to be well informed. In addition to the initial focal point, there will be societies still suffering from misinformation. Considering the most substantial insights, governments denied the events that they have ever taken place. After analyzing the aforementioned points, it's in an attempt to cover up their mistakes. To conclude the discourse provided by the speaker, the significance of misinformation is crucial to the subject matter.
Wow.
Okay. Now, I just want to pause right here. I have 1, I have 2, I have 3, and I have 4 notes. Now, again, if I just go back and read my notes one more time, Ali, it says citizens need to be well informed. There will be societies who are still suffering from misinformation. Now, you see, if let's say I were to focus on lots of volumes of content, if I simply write down citizens, informed, misinformation, events, take place. So if I have lots of words, maybe it would not make any sort of sense.
And this will be the disjointed elements, isn't it?
Exactly, exactly. I would also want to point out the fact that I read those 4 notes, but I was still around 25 seconds. So I was short of time. You know, the idea was for us to speak for around 35 seconds or so, which is the reason why we also have a buffer sentence that we advise, you know, when we take the full lecture classes, we advise the students to have a backup sentence in for recordings like this one. In this lecture, as you could understand that, you know, it was going too fast.
It was very short lecture as well.
And yeah, so a lot of the words are not so clear enough. It was quite short. So, but our objective is to go on for around 35 seconds. There we go. We still have that buffer sentence. Awesome. Okay, so we can go back, rely on that, and just re-inform the most important point, which was around misinformation, and just repeat that sentence. Just repeat the main idea, and it does the trick. This Ali, awesome. I've got one more recording. I just want to have a quick demonstration. So this one probably would be a slow pace. The objective of the second recording is to also give a bit more idea about how to take notes and, you know, a little bit of tricks, so as to say. How can you take smart notes? Okay, so here we go. I'll move on to the next slide. It's an empty one. Here we go. So guys, just be ready.
You can take notes.
Innovation. Equals invention. And let me just stop here. Innovation equals invention. Often people mistake these two things for the same thing. Innovation equals invention. They are not. Innovation is something that generates value for the world. It makes something faster, better, cheaper. It gives someone some great satisfaction. An invention is an idea, a technology, a patent. In and of itself, it does not generate value. So these two are not the same thing. And sometimes you see them interchanged, and that's not correct. So innovation equals invention times commercialization. So, and when we look at this equation of innovation, something of value, it requires a new idea, and then it requires someone or some organization that is going to commercialize that idea and to make a value to the world.
Commercialize that idea and make it a value. Okay, Ali, again, before I explain my note-taking and the skills that I've used, I'm just going to do a quick retell lecture so that everybody understands. Here we go, guys, so pay attention. According to the specific oration provided by the speaker, innovation equals invention is a mistake that common people make. In addition to the initial focal point, innovation generates value. Considering the most substantial insights, invention is an idea or a technology. After analyzing the aforementioned points, it can be stated that these two are not the same, as innovation equals invention times commercialization. To conclude, it requires some commercialization of its value.
All right. Wow. So I can see a lot of arrows.
Yes. So Ali, this is what I wanted to share is that this is what we call in technical terms as annotations, whereby, as you could have understood from the lecture, is that the speaker is repeating a lot of the words, right? And the speaker is repeating a lot of the information. So what I did is that rather than just trying to write everything down over and over again, I simply used symbols. So for an example, I circulated innovation, and then I made a box for invention. So in that way, it reduced a lot of my note taking, and it helped me to concentrate more, and then it helped me to take more complete and meaningful notes. Okay. So guys, this is the last point that I wanted to share, was that always make sure that you are taking structured and smart notes, especially for a retell lecture, because the time limitation, the window is quite short. It's around 35 seconds. Sometimes you might have a recording like this, whereby even though I have a lot of information here, I simply just chose to point out that key factor right there, which was that someone needs to commercialize it. So in that way, sometimes you might end up with lots of notes, but it's only those key factors that you want to say. So Ali, I believe, I've covered quite a bit, and hopefully this was quite informative for the students. Awesome. The bottom line of the story is that focus on completeness and correctness of your notes. Don't focus on volume. Focus on quality, focus on completeness. That's number one. Number two is always ensure that you're speaking for around 36 seconds. And option three is that make sure you're taking clear and concise notes and speak them clearly as well. Okay.
I think I just got two more questions, if you don't mind. Yeah. So there was something interesting in this lecture. There were a lot of pauses, but as soon as the speaker started to speak, he was so fast. The speech rate was so fast. So this may be a bit tricky to students. How can you advise them not to be tricked by some pauses given sometimes by the speaker?
Okay, so dear students, I hope you were paying attention to how I was reacting when the speaker started to speak too fast, or when I was starting to take notes. So did you observe that I was actually mumbling back the notes? When I was writing, I was mumbling back the notes. So the reason why I was doing is that because if you get affected by the pace of the speaker, you'll get lost, you'll lose track. But if you focus on yourself, and as soon as you've understood something and you mumble back and as you write, it helps you to concentrate more. So that was the way, Ali, I ensured that I was not influenced by the speaker's pace.
And how many lectures should a student practice a day? Are two enough?
These two are enough to get some ideas, but as you can see, it's a lot of it has to do with skill building. So I would advise the students, make sure you have a better understanding. So if you still have few doubts, be sure to be in touch with us, and we will give you a better guideline, and we will clear all your doubts. And then, of course, get a study plan and exactly find out which areas you need to work, and then keep on working on those areas.
Thank you, Atiq, so much. And
thank you, Ali, for just asking those valuable questions. I believe hundreds of students will have. Hopefully, all those questions that you asked, clears a lot of the doubts for the students.
Okay, thank you, Atiq, so much. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Ali, and take care. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We'll catch you on the next one. Bye.